Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Lily.
And I'm Oliver. You are listening to Science in Easy English.
Today, we are asking a question that, honestly, it sounds a bit like a magic trick.
It really does. Why do fake pills actually work?
It sounds like magic, but as we're going to find out in this deep dive, it's actually some very hardcore biology.
I have to be honest, this topic has always confused me. When I hear the word placebo, I immediately think fake. I think sugar pill. I think nothing.
That is the most common perception. It's basically synonymous with a sham.
Right. And so the logic follows that if I have a headache and I take a sugar pill and that headache goes away, my first thought is that the headache wasn't even real to begin with.
That it was all in your head.
Yeah. It feels like if a placebo works, it's implying the illness was imaginary.
And that is exactly the misconception we are going to dismantle today. If there is one thing you take away from this deep dive, it is this. The placebo effect is not about an imaginary illness. It is a tangible neurobiological event. It's not just about pleasing the patient, which is, what placebo means in Latin.
Right.
It is about activating the body's internal pharmacy.
The internal pharmacy. I really like that image. So we aren't just imagining relief, we're chemically producing it.
Precisely. We are talking about the brain releasing its own painkillers, its own mood stabilizers,
Right.
and even its own motor control chemicals. But before we get into the brain chemistry, which is fascinating, we should probably look at how we even figured this out.
Yeah, the history is really interesting here. I was reading about Benjamin Franklin debunking mesmerism way back in the 18th century.
Proving it was all belief, yeah.
But the real turning point, that seems to be World War II, right?
It was. This is the real origin story of modern placebo science. We have to talk about Dr. Henry Beecher.
He was an anesthesiologist.
Serving in World War II, and the situation he was in was pretty dire.
Desperate, sounds like.
It was. He was treating badly injured soldiers, near the front lines. We are talking severe combat wounds.
Shrapnel, bullet wounds, that kind of thing.
Devastating trauma. And at one point, the field hospital completely ran out of morphine.
That is a nightmare scenario.
Yeah.
You have soldiers in absolute agony risking shock from the pain, and you have no painkillers.
Exactly. So out of sheer desperation, a nurse filled a syringe with saline solution.
Just regular salt water.
Salt water, and gave it to a wounded soldier, acting as if it were a potent dose of morphine. She went through the whole routine.
And the soldier, he believed it was morphine.
Yes. And here's the incredible part. The soldier didn't go into shock.
He didn't.
In fact, he reported significant pain relief. He physically responded as if he had been given a powerful opiate.
Salt water stopped the agony of a war wound. That's just hard to wrap your head around.
It did. And this completely changed Beecher's career. When he came back from the war, he started analyzing clinical trials.
And this led to a famous paper, right?
A very famous paper in 1955 called The Powerful Placebo. He estimated that about 35% of therapeutic benefits in treating patients could just be this placebo response.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this brings me right back to my original struggle. How? How can salt water stop agony? I get that belief is powerful, but pain is a physical signal. It's damaged nerves sending a message to the brain. How does nothing stop that?
This is where we have to stop thinking of the placebo as nothing. The salt water is nothing.
Okay.
But the brain's reaction to the salt water and to the nurse and the needle, that is something very, very real. When that soldier believed he was getting relief, his brain unlocked that internal pharmacy.
So the brain literally has its own stash of drugs.
Essentially, yes. We are talking about endogenous opioids, endorphins.
Endorphins, okay.
These are chemicals your brain produces naturally that lock onto the very same receptors as morphine or heroin.
So the brain sees the syringe, expects the relief, and then it floods the system with its own natural painkillers.
Exactly. And we can prove it's not just in their head. There was this brilliant study involving a drug called naloxone.
Naloxone. I think I know that one. It's an opioid antagonist, right?
Yeah.
They use it to reverse heroin overdoses.
Correct. It essentially puts a lock on the opioid receptors in your brain so the drug can't get in. It blocks morphine.
Okay, so how does that connect to placebos?
Well, researchers gave patients a placebo for pain. The patients felt relief. Their natural opioids were clearly working. Then, without telling them, the researchers gave them naloxone.
And what happened?
The pain came right back. The placebo relief stopped instantly.
Wow. Okay, that is definitive proof.
It is. If the placebo effect were just imaginary or psychological, blocking those receptors shouldn't matter. But because naloxone stopped the relief, it proves that the placebo had triggered the release of real chemical opioids in the brain.
The salt water didn't stop the pain.
The brain's own morphine stopped the pain.
That is mind-blowing. It's like the brain has the medicine cabinet locked, and the belief is the key that opens it.
That's a great analogy. And it's not just for pain. This mechanism applies to other conditions, too, even really structural ones like Parkinson's disease.
This part of the research really surprised me. I mean, Parkinson's is a degenerative neurological disease.
Right. Tremors, muscle rigidity.
It's caused by a lack of dopamine. It feels like a hardware problem, you know, not software. You can't just wish for more dopamine, can you?
Well, let's look at the data. Researchers used PET scans brain imaging to look at the brains of Parkinson's patients. They gave them a placebo, a fake pill, but told them it was their medication.
And they looked inside the brain to see what happened.
They looked specifically at the striatum, which is a part of the brain involved in motor control. And they found that when the patients took the fake pill, their brains released a surge of dopamine.
A fake pill caused the brain to create the very chemical it was missing.
Yes. In some cases, the dopamine release was comparable to the amount you'd see if someone took amphetamines.
That is incredible power.
Yeah.
We are not talking about a subtle shift here. We're talking about a massive chemical dump.
And it gets even deeper. They measured the electrical activity of individual neurons. In Parkinson's, these neurons tend to fire in a bursting pattern.
Like a glitchy, stuttering signal.
Right, which causes the tremors. After the placebo, the neurons actually changed their firing pattern. They shifted from that bursting pattern to a non-bursting one.
So a fake pill can actually reverse the malfunction of a complex neuronal circuit.
Yes. It shows that the expectation of healing can drive biological changes right down to the cellular level.
Okay, so the biology is real. It's opioids, it's dopamine. But what triggers it? Is it just thinking, I'm going to get better?
It's a mix of two main psychological mechanisms. One is conscious expectation, that's the belief part. But the other one is unconscious. It's conditioning.
Like Pavlov's dogs.
Exactly like Pavlov's dogs.
Yeah.
Pavlov rang a bell. The dogs salivated because they associated the bell with food. For us, if you've taken an aspirin for a headache 100 times, your brain has learned a very strong association.
White round pill equals pain relief.
Exactly. So the moment you see the pill or taste it, the process starts before it even hits your stomach.
There was a study in the notes about stimulants and relaxants that really highlighted this for me.
Oh, the stimulant versus relaxant study. A classic. They took a group of people and gave them all the exact same pill, an inert sugar pill.
Right. But they told half the group it was a stimulant and the other half it was a relaxant.
And the results were fascinating. The people who thought they took a stimulant, their pulse and blood pressure actually went up.
And the other group?
The people who thought they took a relaxant reported feeling drowsy and their vitals slowed down.
From the same pill. That is just wild.
The meaning attached to the pill changed the physical reaction. And this brings us to the whole ritual of medicine. Because it turns out the context, the drama of healing, it acts as a drug itself.
This is where it gets really interesting for me. The idea that the packaging changes the effectiveness.
It absolutely does. We have massive amounts of data on this. For instance, color. Red, orange, or yellow pills are generally perceived as stimulants.
And blue or green are calming.
Exactly. Or quantity. 2 pills work better than 1.
More is better. That feels very human.
And the delivery method matters. Injections have a significantly stronger placebo effect than pills.
Because an injection feels more medical. More serious.
It's a more invasive ritual, yeah. It signals to the brain, this is serious help, we need a serious response. And then there's branding and price.
Oh, the wine tasting analogy. I love this.
It's so true. If you tell someone a wine costs $5 and then give them the same wine and say it costs $50, they will almost always say the $50 wine tastes better.
Their brain actually registers more pleasure.
And the same applies to fake drugs. In studies, expensive fake drugs provide more pain relief than cheap fake drugs.
Wow. If we think it's valuable, our body makes it valuable.
Mm.
But I have to think the biggest factor of all is the doctor, right?
The practitioner is crucial. The white coat, the diplomas on the wall. But more than that, it's the warmth and empathy. A diagnosis alone reduces anxiety. The sources call this the meaning response.
So the doctor is, in a way, part of the drug.
The doctor's a drug. The care, the relationship, it all feeds into that expectation and anxiety reduction that triggers the biological response.
But here's a question. Does this work for everyone? because I feel like I might be a skeptic.
Yeah.
Is there a placebo personality? Are some people just more gullible?
You know, the sources actually say that the idea of a specific placebo personality is a myth. It's not about being gullible. However, there is a genetic component.
A genetic component to believing in fake pills. That sounds like science fiction.
It's called the placebo.
The placebo.
It's the genetics of the placebo response. Remember we talked about dopamine?
Yeah.
Well, there is a gene called COMT catecholomethyltransferase.
COMT. Okay, what does it do?
This gene makes an enzyme that clears dopamine from the brain. Think of it as the janitor that sweeps away dopamine after it's done its job.
Okay.
Now, people have different versions of this gene. Some people have a version that makes the enzyme a bit lazy. It doesn't clear dopamine as fast.
So those people just have more dopamine floating around.
Specifically in the prefrontal cortex, the part for planning and expectation. And the data shows people with this specific variation are much more likely to respond to placebos.
So if you have this gene, you're chemically primed to get that dopamine surge we talked about.
Exactly. It suggests we might actually screen people in the future to see if they're placebo responders. It could revolutionize clinical trials.
That is fascinating. It takes it completely out of the realm of personality and into hard genetics. But there's an elephant in the room here.
What's that?
The deception. For a placebo to work, I have to believe it's real. That means you, the doctor, have to lie to me. That seems like a deal breaker.
This is the great ethical dilemma. Can you cure someone by lying to them? But here's the plot twist. You don't actually have to lie.
What do you mean? If I know it's sugar, it won't work. My brain is going to be tricked if I know the secret.
That is what we used to think. But recent studies on open-label placebos are changing everything.
Open label. So here's a pill. It's fake. Take it.
Basically, they did studies with patients suffering from irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, and chronic back pain. They gave them a placebo and said explicitly, this is a placebo. It has no active drug.
So they told him it was fake.
They told them it was fake, but then added, it has helped others through mind-body self-healing processes.
Oh.
Don't tell me it worked.
It worked. Significant symptom relief. In the IBS study, the improvement was dramatic.
How is that possible? If I know it's fake, my expectations should be zero.
Well, remember, the conditioning, the ritual. Taking a pill twice a day is a powerful ritual.
Huh.
Even if your conscious mind knows it's sugar, your body recognizes the act of taking medicine. It triggers what they call embodied predictive processing. Your body says, oh, we're doing the healing ritual now. Okay, release the endorphins.
So the body's essentially on autopilot. It sees the pill and reacts, regardless of what the conscious mind thinks.
Exactly. It validates the idea that the ritual itself is a therapy. It's not just the deception, it's the act of treatment. That's actually really encouraging. It means we can harness this power without the ethical mess of lying.
Precisely.
Now, we've been talking about all the good stuff, pain relief, Parkinson's improvement. But if the mind can heal, can it also harm?
Unfortunately, yes. This is the dark side of the placebo. It's called the nocebo effect.
Nocebo, that sounds ominous. I will harm.
Right. It's when negative expectations cause negative symptoms.
Like reading the side effects on a bottle and suddenly feeling them.
That is the classic example. If you read that a drug causes nausea, you're much more likely to feel nauseous, even if it's a sugar pill. It's driven by anxiety.
Is there a chemical for this too, or is this just stress?
It is chemical. Just like placebo involves opioids and dopamine, nocebo involves a hormone called cholecystokinin, CCK.
CCK, and what does that do?
It facilitates pain transmission. It basically turns up the volume on your pain receptors. There was a study where they hooked people up to a machine that delivered a painful current.
Crap.
Then they turned the intensity down, but they told the participants they were turning it up.
Let me guess. They felt more pain.
They felt more pain, even though the physical stimulus was less. Their expectation of pain actually amplified the signal.
Because they were anxious.
Yes. And we know it's chemical because if you give them a drug that blocks CCK, that nocebo hyperalgesia, that increased sensitivity, it just disappears.
So anxiety literally turns up the volume knob on pain.
It does, which is crucial for doctors to understand. How you frame a treatment matters. If you say, this is going to hurt a lot, you are chemically ensuring it will hurt more.
Wow. It really makes you realize how careful we have to be with our words. Words can physically change brain chemistry.
They absolutely can.
So we've covered a lot. We've gone from salt water in World War II to dopamine neurons to genes and open-label sugar pills. What's the big takeaway here?
I think we need to reframe the narrative. For a long time, science has looked at the placebo effect as noise. It's the thing you want to get rid of in a drug trial so you can see if the real drug works.
Right, it's the interference.
But the sources are arguing we should stop seeing it as noise. It represents the doctor as a drug. It represents the body's innate capacity to heal. The care, the ritual, the relationship, these aren't just nice extras. They are active treatments.
So we should be maximizing these effects in legitimate medicine.
Exactly. When a doctor prescribes a real active drug, they should also be using warmth, clear explanation, positive framing.
To get a double effect, you get the chemical benefit plus the internal pharmacy benefit.
Yes. We need to combine the chemistry of drugs with the chemistry of care. If we ignore the ritual, we are leaving a huge amount of healing potential on the table.
That is a powerful idea. It's not magic, it's biology. But it's a biology that responds to human connection and belief.
And that is a resource we should be using, not dismissing.
Well, this has certainly changed how I look at that bottle of aspirin in my cabinet. It's not just about the pill. It's about the story I tell myself when I take it and the ritual of taking care of yourself.
That's it.
Exactly. Before we go, here is a thought to leave you with. If the fake pill works because of the ritual and the relationship, are we relying too much on the chemistry of drugs and ignoring the chemistry of care? Could the future of medicine be prescribing rituals openly alongside or maybe even instead of chemicals for certain conditions?
It's a fascinating possibility, something to think about.
Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for listening.
We'll catch you next time on Science in Easy English.
Bye.